Welcome to the latest video. In this one I'm going to try and show you how to hand scribe a joint into a frame with a cutter that you might not stock a scribing cutter for. So if you've got to replace a frame with a special moulding on the jambs and the head and you need to scribe the jambs over the head moulding, this is how I would go about doing it. Basically, if it's windows you're making all the while, you can get cutters for your spindle moulder or tennoner that will do the counterpart profile of the cut that you make on the timber or the jamb. So this cutter, let me just focus that. This cutter would cut your timber along the grain on the jamb. So you would cut in like this, make that profile, and on the counterpart where the jamb would mortise over into the head, this cutter would make the counterpart cut like so, and then the two should marry up nicely. That's all well and good if you've got the appropriate cutters. If you're doing a one-off frame, it's just as easy to hand scribe that cut. So start with, these are your jambs, the uprights of your door frame. Always mark a face and an edge, so we've got a face mark here and an edge, and you're defining them by looking at the timber, looking for any imperfections, splits, cuts, knots, anything like that. If you've got something on an edge that's sort of damaged a corner, usually try and take that out with a moulding cut or a rebate cut. Equally, if there's something in the middle, roughly around the place where the edge of the rebate is for the door, you don't want to be putting that where your door is, because then you're going to end up filling that corner or having a weak point on that corner of the frame. So choosing the piece of timber and orientating it in the right manner is quite important for a start. Once you've done that, face and edge, always mark a top and a bottom, or just a top mark, so you know that's your top joint, because 9 times out of 10, well, all the time on a door frame, the top joint is different from the bottom joint. So it stops you basically turning it round and doing the same cut on the bottom on the machine, and yeah, you'll be starting again if you do that. Quite an easy mistake to make. So when you've done that, basically you've got to mark out your tenons for where you're going to put your tenon width and the depth of the cut of the tenons, so you can cut them. So I'll just bring the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. I'll put a face mark up here for you so you can see this is my edge and this is my face. So this is an opening door, so I'll be treating my face as the outside of the door. This is the top, and my edge mark defines the inside edge of the door, so where the cuts will be for the moulding on this edge and the rebate on this side. So if you look at that from the end, this will be my moulding section and this will be my rebate here, and that's defined by these marks here. Now to set these out, I've already set it out on one, but I'm going to do it again for you so you can see on the camera. Right, so the inside edge, you mark on your timber sizes. So we're using a 60mm head. Only mark on 60mm from the end of your piece of timber if these are cut to full height of the frame. Quite often I'll cut them 20mm short, and then you'll have to mark the timber depth, obviously deducting that 20mm away so that you don't cut the shoulders too short for the frame. So you want your overall height of your frame of 2090 to be from that point in the thickness of your timber. So we've got 60mm at the top, and at the bottom we've got 45 and 7, 52 and 15, 62, 67 mil. It says there 67. So basically this mark here to the mark at the bottom on the inside of the timber should be 2090 minus the 60 mil for the head and the 67 for the sill. Now once you've got that inside line, that's the furthest, most inner point of the timber on the head. So from that line we mark the depth of our rebate for the door. So on these it's going to be 15 mil. So I'll try and explain that for you. The rebate depth, so imagine this is a cross section of your door, the head of the door. The rebate depth will be where the door's going. So like this, that is your rebate depth. So I'm doing that 15 mil. 15 mil, and that's off the inside edge of the door. So this is outside, this is inside. So that's 15 mil. Now we need to look at what cutters we're going to put as a moulding. I'm going to be using these today. This is the moulding I want. I have got a scribing cutter for this, but for the purposes of the video, I'm going to cut them by hand. So this cut's going to be made like this into the timber. So we can work out basically how deep that is going to be. Actually, I'm going to do it like that and change my mind. Keep more of the frame. Right, so we can work out the depth of this by judging that amount there. So we're going to be cutting into the timber with that cutter 8 mil. So 8 mil from that line there. Sorry, my hand's annoying there. So we've got 8 mil there, which will be the depth of that cut there into the timber. So that will be the mould profile there. It'll look something like that. So that's our shoulder point of 8 mil. We can take that line now and square that over. So that's our tenon, or shoulder point for our tenon. Now the depth of our rebate in the other direction is 65 millimeters. So it's going to look something like that. Perfect. So 65 mil. So looking at that, there's not enough space here really for a tenon and to leave any strength in the timber. So our tenon is going to go within the rebate. So my cutter block on my tennoner is going to cut down at 65 mil from the inside there to that shoulder line and take that out. Now I'm using a tennoner, but if you're doing this by hand, that's your square cut. So tenon cut there, shoulder cut there, and that's your first cut. I'm going to be using a 16 mil mortise chisel. So we want a 16 mil tenon. Which is that there. So that will be left on part of the timber. And then this is our second cut for the tennoner. Again, you could cut this by hand if you wish. If you're cutting by hand, you'd put a score line in there with a marking knife or a gouge and mark them through. So you can mark these lines over. Should really be using the proper square. Mark them over. got our 2 tenon cuts, so that one there, that one there. Once we've made them cuts to match this profile here, you'll be cutting on a 45-degree angle and just chiseling that line of the moulding that appears on that 45-degree line. And you just chisel it back 5 or 6 mil from the edge, and the same on the frame. You leave 5 or 6 mil of the moulding on and then just chop it flush with their shoulder line, and the joint will go together scribed over the moulding. Okay, so now we've cut the tenon for the head. What I like to do is I like to tenon them first to a set thickness using a vernier caliper. I know what works well with the mortise chisel. If you're doing a sort of a frame head with my chisels, it's a 16mm chisel, so if I do a frame between 15.6 and 15.8mm on the tenon, it's usually a pretty good fit. If you're doing something like a door style with a, say, 150mm deep tenon, then you probably want to be a bit less thickness on your tenon, around 15.5mm, and it just gives you a bit less tension in the joint when you're trying to knock it together or clamp it together. It means the tenon will actually slide in, not freely, there's still resistance there, but it means you're not having to destroy the edges of the door trying to get the thing together, especially on a complicated door where you've got to put it together and take it apart several times. You want to get that tenon thickness just right. So I find it easier to do that on the tennoner first. You're not worrying about two things then. All you're worrying about is position of the tenon roughly and the thickness of it. Whereas if you do your mortising first, you've then got to locate the tenon precisely on the piece of timber, as well as get the thickness exactly where you need it, which you can spend a good 10 minutes on there trying to set that up if you're, a bit unlucky. So the foolproof, easy way of doing it I've found is just to tenon them first to a thickness that you know will work, and then come to the morticer and put the mortise in the position to make the joint flush. So once you've tenoned it, come over to your morticer and just line it up. There we go. Now we're ready to mortise the head. Okay, so the same principle applies with the head and the sills. This one's my sill because it's slightly thicker. So you check all the edges, find any imperfections. Usually try and highlight them so you can see them later on. Okay. So we'll use this as the outside face. This is our head. And that's quite bad, but it's fillable. We'll put this on the inside so it's not going to see any weather whether you fill it. That face is nice and clean, this edge is nice and crisp. We'll use that as our outside edge where the moulding's going to go, and this side will get rebaited. So this is our head. This is our sill. Now I've cut these off to length, but you can leave them longer if you wish. And you mark out your overall length, which in this case is 880. And again, you come in from that mark, your thickness of your timber, of your jamb. So that's 60mm. And you square them over. This is your critical line, so everything will work off this again, just the same as it did on the jambs. So in from this, you come in 15mm, because that's the depth of your rebate. We need to come in with our mortise 15mm, because on our tenons, I'll try and show you, it's a long bit of wood. The tenons that we did earlier, this is being, because the rebate is 65mm deep here, when you cut that rebate, you actually cut 15mm away from your tenon. So when you come to put your tenon into here, if you don't allow that 15mm as a setback, you end up with a big hole there, and you think, oh my god, what happened? It's a standard apprentice mistake. You will do it if you're an apprentice. I don't think I know anyone that hasn't done it. I still see quite a few people do it, even though they've been doing it years. But yeah, if anyone says to you, remember your setbacks, that is what your setback is. It's when you're rebating your tenon, you need to set back your mortise the depth of that rebate so you don't have a gap. So that's your 15mm. So that's the edge of your timber, that's the edge of your mortise, and that will be your mortise. And we need to transfer that across to the inside face of the frame. So that there will be our mortise, and the position of it is set on the morticer. You want nice sharp pencils when you're setting out. Okie doke. If you're going to cut these by hand, you would want a mortise gauge. So you get a gauge like this with the 2 pins, and you'd work from your gauge. So it's 65mm to the edge of the mortise. You'd set this gauge up. Always work from the same face whenever you're doing anything. That's what your face marks are for. You set this gauge up to the mortise position. Now your 2 lines. You put a stop line there, so you don't see your gauge lines past that. It should just run into it and stop. When you've got them, I'll highlight them there for the video so you can see them. If you're cutting these by hand, obviously for the mortise you keep to this side of the centre, and if you're cutting the tenon you keep to that side of the centre of the line, and then that creates a tight joint. Okay, on to the morticer. Set this up so it's flush with the tenon, so it's in the right place. When you're mortising the joints, always go down where the edge of the joint is first, or the edge of the mortise. This keeps the chisel nice and true, If you take the centre out of the cut and work your way to the edge, the smaller chisels can tend to deflect away from that line, and you get left with a part that's not cut right up to the line, and it means your joints aren't tight up to that inside line. So you always want to go down that inside edge first and then take the material out the middle afterwards. Okay, so at this point now you've got a tenon cut, basic tenon, and your mortise cut, and your tenon shoulders are cut to the depth of your moulding. So they should fit together like so. So the gap in the joint there should be equivalent to the depth of the moulding that you're going to cut into it. So that gap there of 7mm means that if we do a 15mm rebate, the mould depth needs to be 8mm. So if you do a 15mm rebate out of this piece of timber, and a 15mm equivalent gap there, there is 8mm left there. So we need to be sure that when I mould the moulding into here, that front edge of the moulding on the face here is 8mm, because that will be where we cut that edge back, and that'll be the shoulder of this joint. It'll make sense when I do it. When I'm doing a big cut, like a big rebate for a door, I usually do like a 3mm deep cut at full height before I go for the full 15mm deep cut. It just helps prevent any tear out on that square edge that's left. So 49mm. See where that comes out on here. So we're going to keep the same tenon position, and our sill will look like this. So that'll be the edge of the rebate, and then we'll have a bevel on the sill here of 9 degrees, standard 9-degree bevel. All weathering should be a minimum of 9. I think recommended now is 15 degrees. I'm putting my mortise here because, as per the drawing, you can see here it's back to front to what I'm drawing here, but this here is a stainless steel weather bar. I like to groove into my sills so that if you ever walk on it and catch this edge here, if that's just timber or a draft seal, then it just peels off and it looks terrible. So if that's a metal bar, then it obviously weathers very well against any knocks or bashes from footwear. So that will be the ceiling face. This will be my metal strip that will come in here. So that's my tenon or mortise. So I need to, that'll be the shoulder of my inside face. And then if I square this line across, working out, I've done that wrong, work back from that line there. So I'll be working off this edge of there, 81 degrees. That will be my minimum shoulder for there. So that is again 7mm. So if I keep the tennoner set the same and just adjust it to this depth here over what I've done the other end, then we should be fine to run that through as well. Just a quick note, you always want to do your tenoning before you've done any moulding, because obviously when you're running your tenons through on the machine, you need a backing piece against there. As soon as you cut into that back edge with a rebate or anything, then it's going to blow that edge away if you want to then tenon it again. So always do your end cuts first, and then your moulding cuts. I saw that getting a little hard to push through there, so all you do if that starts happening, make sure you wax your machinery, whether it's hand tools or anything like that. Anywhere the timber is sliding against will get sort of a build-up of residue on it and stop it from sliding. So we want just machine wax, such as this, so you get a very fine coat and it will stop any of that friction. Okay, so now I've done the rebate for the head and the jambs. It's a different size rebate in the sill, so I'll run that through now while the same cutter's in the machine. Okay, so now we've got the rebates done for the jambs here, full length, head, and a different one for the sill, because the door is going to be rebaited over that to create a drip point. So what we'll do now is run that moulding cutter in here to a depth of 8mm like we've established on the tenon allowance. When I'm setting the depth of this cut, you can take a measuring from here, so 60mm, pretty damn accurate. So if we're doing an 8mm cut, you basically let that cutter in until you get down to 52mm. So when that front edge of that cut is at 52mm, that's when we've gone to the right amount, because it will be the right depth for our shoulders, providing this is the right depth. So that should be 15mm deep. We need another mill. Okay, so now we've moulded our sections. I might just need to move the camera away a bit. This is our head, and our sill will be into it like this. That's where you'll be at currently. So we need to let this section here into the shape of that moulding. The way we do that is because this is a 90-degree corner. We chop this back on a 45. So, that back. And if you can quite see from that camera angle, I can give my chisel a sharpen before I actually cut this. That 45 cut there, just a rebaited piece of timber or 2 bits screwed together, cut on the 45. You run your chisel along it and you take it back until you get to this corner here, which is your shoulder. So just bear with me a second while I sharpen the chisel. As the old boy would say to me, you could run down that using your balls for brakes. That's a bit better. Listen to that crisp. The coir is quite dry, so it's not the nicest stuff to chisel, especially if you get a bit of this hard grain that you can see appearing here. You can see how polished that edge has become. What you can do is use a little clamp and get in there, put a clamp on there, make sure it's dead on that edge. Any less than up to the corner and it will hit on your scribe. Any more further away from the corner and it'll have a gap. There we go, just want to make sure that is dead flat. This section here isn't really important, it's just that line that we're following. So once we've got that cut, we then need to take this back. All that 45 has done is given us this profile here. And that should be the exact copy of the moulding that's on the head. I'll move the camera out of the way so it's a bit easier to work on it. So what I'm going to do is take this square edge down to the rebate, maybe a tiny bit beyond, and then the moulding, similar sort of depth. When you're cutting these scribes, you just want to keep it so it's ever so slightly undercut. So this edge here that you see that touches the other moulding is the highest point, and everything else is cut in. So if that's square, your cuts are slightly undercutting. You get to the curved sections, you want to gouge. Okay, and that's the scribe cut. If you look at how that will fit in with the other section now, I've purposely not let the other section away so you can see the effect that that has. So, when we pull this in, it still looks the same, it's the same gap away. What we need to do, where we've cut that scribe down to, here, we need to now take that from that point there. You need to take all of this section back to that depth there, square, to let that piece out, and that joint should go together. Hopefully that should tap together. Might need a tiny bit of adjustments. There you go, that's not bad. We'll do the same principle on this other joint as well. So I took the depth, I didn't say before, the 15mm. You want to just go slightly beyond that because that's the rebate depth and you don't want to see the cuts from the scribe within that rebate. Otherwise, you see that the end of the cuts and this piece here. If you cut that higher than the rebate, you're going to see it within that direction. So you always want to go deeper with your scribe than your rebate. Put that cut in there as a bit of a stop cut, so that any grain that's peeling off doesn't tear into the shouldered face. For the purposes of this video, just showing you how to scribe the frames. I will assemble the frame now, but obviously at this point you'd be running in all your drip grooves, draft strip grooves, you'd sand all your inside edges, make sure everything's smooth. External surfaces will all need a 3mm rounding edge. So you'd run that 3mm round on this corner on the outside, and also on the joints you'd have a 3mm round as well, and then fill them grooves with a flexible sealant before you paint it. Like I say, for the purposes of the video and the fact that we're doing the scribe and that's what we're focusing on, I'll screw it together now and you can see the finished article. I might actually show you before I screw it together, just from this other side view. I talked earlier about the setbacks. If you hadn't have allowed the setback for where this piece of material has been removed off the tenon, it would look like that. Ignoring that hole there, you'd see a big gaping hole. Secondly, just wanted to show you, dropping it to bits, if you don't scribe deep enough in here to go beyond the rebate, and your rebate is up to, or your tenon is in the rebate, you will basically see this cut here, which is what I was on about earlier. So you want to do that so it's deep enough to be hidden. It's nice and neat within the rebate, like so. Let's screw it together. Here's run a pilot screw in with the coir. Now we have it, finished article. It could be any scribe whatsoever, any profile on here. You just need to allow the depth of it within your tenons, shoot it over on the 45 and scribe it through. Hope you've enjoyed the video and it's helped someone out along the way as to how to make a simple frame. I'll be doing a few more of these types of things, so please hit the subscribe button.